Hi, I'm Jennifer Podemsky, and I wanted to just give you a little bit of an insight to us as Native people. We don't love land acknowledgements. We don't love listening to them, and we usually don't present them in our own ceremonies or gatherings. So I wanted to offer something special, and that is an action item that will amplify your work as an ally and bring more attention to the work that I'm doing at the Shine Network, which is a not-for-profit organization serving Indigenous women in the screen sector. So we've created a course, the first one of its kind in the world. It's a cultural sensitivity course for the Canadian screen sector, and it's available for free at theshinenetwork.ca. It's called Pact, and I would love for you to take it. And that's my land acknowledgement. This is an actionable way you can showcase your allyship.
Hey firecrackers, this is Naomi and welcome to the Firecracker Department. Okay, I'm so excited to share this chat with you. I'm talking with the incredible Jennifer Liao, who is not only a fantastic director and producer, but just an all-round awesome artist. I worked with Jennifer on Murdoch Mysteries and we talk about that in this show, but she just kicked me in the artist butt when we worked together, and I loved that. She really pushed me in our scene, and so after we worked together, I was like, please come and do my podcast, and she graciously said yes. Now, you've probably seen her work, without even realizing it. Hudson and Rex, and as I said, Murdoch Mysteries. But trust me, you're going to want to hear all about her way into her projects, how she brings her Jenniferness to her projects, and her perspective to everything that she touches. So grab a seat, or go for a jog, or do your dishes, organize your spice drawer, whatever you do while you're listening to this, and soak in Jennifer's amazing voice, her discussion about her journey, the industry, and some super fun behind-the-scenes stories too. Here we go, my chat with Jennifer Liao. I'm so happy to have some time with you because I think you're fantastic, but also I've been seeing what you've been working on. And when we had like tacos in Los Angeles that one time, who was that through? Who introduced us?
I think it might have been Jillian Mueller.
Of course it was Jillian Mueller.
Yeah,
Of course.
I think we were all together at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like just having those kind of random connections, and we were talking about film and things like that. And you just, it's never enough time, right? You never have enough time to really get into people's backgrounds and in those kind of like fleeting dinners. So it's really nice to have some time with you now.
Well, I honestly, it's so lovely for you to ask. I'm so honored to be invited to chat with you because I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So it's nice to have it was nice to have the opportunity to have tacos with you as well at that time. And certainly I think it was I feel like it was definitely a pre-pandemic gathering as well. So
it was like just pre, right? Wasn't it just before? Like it felt
was
like
probably very close to just before. Yeah.
Because my friend always makes fun of me. She said, if you have a good time, when Naomi has a good time at like dinner, she tries to make it a monthly thing. And I remember like hanging out with both of you and going, okay, how do we do this again? And then I think the pandemic took it over.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah. I feel like it's just it's in such a strange amount of time since then.
I also love I was looking at your past, and I think it's so interesting to find out how careers morph. Like I didn't know that you started in as an actor.
I did, yeah. It's interesting because I look back at that now, and I did pursue it for quite some time. But I had grown up really wanting to be a writer. I thought I was going to write multicam sitcoms. That was the main thing that I wanted to do.
Which one were you watching?
News Radio was my favorite.
Yes,
my favorite show.
Yes.
It still is, honestly. Yeah,
I loved News Radio.
I was completely obsessed with it, and it was also during the early days of the public internet, which kind of coincided with my age at the time, being kind of a young person who was just discovering that you could learn a lot about shows, TV shows and movies and things like that, with just a click of a few keys.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was something that was really exciting to me because at the time I think there was also a lot of, or at least it was sort of the beginnings of, the general public even understanding who wrote TV shows and that you could write TV
Right.
shows.
Right.
Uh,
Like, oh, somebody doesn't just make this up on the spot. Like it was so, and
exactly.
especially something like news radio, that those characters were so like, mwah. Ugh, they were so beautiful. Phil Hartman, come on, you're not going to get better than those folks.
Oh gosh. I mean, Phil Hartman really, truly just one of the best to ever do it, I think.
Yeah. But then
But
also, like, I mean, not to just nerd out for a second on news radio, but like Andy Dick had moments in that show that made me weep with laughter. You know?
Oh my gosh. I mean, he really did. I mean, my understanding now is he's perhaps a bit of a troubled person, but
I mean,
I
that
think
cast
that
didn't
as
do
a,
great, right? I mean, Joe
there
Rogan
was,
went on to
there was
being,
a,
look,
I mean,
we're in a whole other territory.
there, there was a, there was a lot of, I mean, there was a lot of talk at the time, I think, about the ensemble of that show. And
Yeah,
truly, I look back on it and I do think that was what made the show work, is that they
agreed.
had an ensemble that had so many unusual different people, coming together and all their comedy worked together. And that was
Yeah,
really, I think, what was very exciting about it. And even now, I think I really value shows and movies where you can have an interesting ensemble where,
me
you
too.
have different types of people. Certainly, even just in terms of to age range and race and all that sort of stuff, I think you can go even further. I mean, I worked on a show that did have a very large ensemble that of just incredible actors of all different age ranges and
Yeah.
styles, even, and just in terms of their acting and stuff like
Was that
that. And this is the
from?
most exciting thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was from
Yeah. I know. I looked
and
at that cast list and I was like, are you kidding me? Like that, those are all like lead actors in different shows. Do you know what I mean? Like they could all have
oh,
their
for
own show,
sure.
but you pulled them together and like it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean that. So I've always liked workplace shows too. So that was why news radio was, I think, hit a lot of
Yeah,
checked
me
a lot of
too.
boxes for me, because that's the thing about workplaces, or again, a show like From is actually a show about people who would not even necessarily ever find themselves in the same place together, but are stuck in the same place. So I think that's in a way similar to a
Right.
workplace sitcom
Right.
where it's sort of the idea of people who wouldn't necessarily choose to spend time with each other on purpose, at least not at the outset, and then end up um, working together. But yeah, I mean, I loved, there were so many shows around that time. It was such a boom in the 90s for sitcoms.
But you knew you wanted to write that kind of thing. Like when was the time where you went, oh, I think I care more about writing, directing, producing than acting?
Um, I'm not exactly sure like I remember thinking back on it, I don't remember so much the trajectory. But I do remember enjoying performing a lot when I was younger. Just being in school and studying speech arts and drama and all that sort of stuff.
Speech arts?
Um,
What's speech arts?
yes.
That sounds fancy. Speech
Well,
arts.
I'm from Alberta, so uh I attended, oh gosh, I don't know the names of anything anymore, but there was a Mount Royal College was which I think has a different name now, but I think they were a proper college, but then they also would offer all sorts of classes and things like that. And so when we were growing up and did extracurricular activities, my sister and I had piano lessons. Uh, we
You
had
did it
dance
all.
lessons. Yeah, I didn't stick with dance lessons. That was a very brief period of time
It's
for
not
me.
over. It's still
Um,
around the corner if you want it to be, Jennifer.
I played the violin for a couple
Oh
of
my God.
years, but the main thing that I ended up sticking with was speech arts, and they would actually have kind of Kiwanis competitions.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, that was sort of I think that's what it was all structured around in a
Hmm.
way, because I don't know why it would just exist in a vacuum. I think it was sort of the idea that you could, have all sorts of really, cultured kids and offer them, you know, uh, classes and programs and lessons on things. And so it was, I think we were ultimately, put into these programs at a very young age, I might add. Like I don't actually remember when I started, but it was probably close to 4 or 5 years old. But I think my parents thought it would be a good way for me to um, learn how to be an eloquent uh, speaker,
Yeah.
all those types of things.
I
Like it
think
was,
that's super helpful for kids.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think that probably went a little further than they expected in the sense that, like, I became a professional creative.
Right. And they're like, oh, no, wait, wait, we don't want that much. Not that much creative.
And for a long time, a non-professional creative. I'll put it that way. But
It ebbs and flows, my friend. Yeah.
but we would recite poetry and Shakespeare monologues
Amazing.
um and uh prose pieces, I'm sure too, but
Yeah.
scenes and things like that. But it was a solo, generally done solo. There were times I think I did work with other people, but essentially I would go, it was sort of like having piano lessons.
Yeah.
We would go every week, spend an hour or so, private tutoring with a lovely woman named Jennifer Orr. And I did that all through my youth. So
Wow.
that, yeah,
Wait,
pretty
I'm gonna
much
put you on the
until
spot. Do you remember any lines from your monologues? Like even the monologues I did in like theater school, I can still remember chunks of them.
the quality of mercy is not strained. It cometh as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. Um, it is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightier in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his sword. I think I'm missing.
That's fantastic.
I think I'm missing pieces, but that's the Merchant
That's
of Venice.
fantastic. Yes.
Uh,
That's
uh,
such a great speech.
it's yeah, it's a. I do sometimes look it up because I do try and. Sometimes I'll think of it and I'll just remember the lines of it, and I'm sure if I looked it up, I would realize I'm like missing
That's right. That's
that
right.
I've missed lines here.
Yeah.
And it was also a very analysis oriented
Yeah.
program. So you would learn what every single line meant. That
And
was
the
actually even
punctuation and
yeah, even
yeah.
that was even part of the competitions. Like you would do your piece, perform your piece, and then the adjudicator would ask you questions. They would ask
Really?
you, "What does this mean when you say this?" Or
Oh,
they would
fantastic.
so it was something where you actually had to learn those things. And then
Yeah.
there was also a very technical element to those classes where you would learn how to breathe and you would learn,
Yeah.
and
Because the punctuation is the breathing, right?
oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And even just to be able to speak and use your breath properly, whether it's Shakespeare or not, if we would write essays about breathing. You essentially would learn a lot of theoretical
Love it.
things about speaking. So that was a huge, huge part of my
Do you think that
uh
informed you as a writer now? Like, do you think about that kind of thing as you're writing?
um less about the breathing, but
Yeah.
but definitely about the about yeah about analyzing text or characters or things like that.
Yeah.
That was definitely the basis or sort of an early basis for that. So
But you knew that
I'm
you wanted to focus more in that world, like in producing, because you started producing quite quickly.
um I think I wanted to be a sitcom writer growing up, and the thing that happened was that I realize now was just maybe just it seemed like a small thing at the time, but I think it probably did kind of put me on a slightly different path at the time. But I went to Los Angeles for a couple of months after I graduated university, and as we both know, getting your papers to work in the States when you're a Canadian is a whole other can of worms. And
That's
I
right.
thought I was going to go over there and start being a PA and doing all that sort of stuff. And I had someone who was going to help me with that in the sense that they knew someone who had a show that would
Yeah.
hire, new young PAs and stuff like that. And the reality of it is that you can't get a visa on a PA job. It's
Right.
visas are as you know, they have a very specific purpose, which is that I guess they call it an alien of extraordinary ability.
Right.
And I don't think they consider PAs a high enough
I mean,
a high enough uniquely skilled kind of position
yes.
where they would go, oh yes, we should get you a visa so that you can go into the country. So that's what the lawyer I spoke to at the time told me. So I ended up coming back to Canada and moving to Toronto to live with my sister, and you know it wasn't that I'd totally given up on that, but I did kind of want to see what acting held for me, because I enjoyed it so much, and I
Hmm.
was feeling um a little un after that happened. I was like,
Yeah.
the sort of strength and tenacity that you need to be able to push through and keep going after something, was something I was still learning, and of course have learned over and over again in various
But I think you're right.
different
Those are
ways. But
muscles. Like whatever you
yeah,
experienced in
yeah.
Los Angeles, you kind of go like there is a little bit of, I mean, that sounds too dramatic, but healing after you spend time in Los Angeles because it isn't, I don't know, I didn't find it artistic focus there.
That's maybe fair. I think one of the things that was just the reality of it was that there I had, one person or two who were going to help me have this direct path to, again, being a PA on a show, maybe even unpaid at the beginning. I don't even know.
I know. I
Maybe
know.
it would have been an internship or something. I truly am not certain at this point in time, but I didn't have any of the same things in Canada, and I also think that a lot of the advice that you learn from, even now, from reading up and so forth, any access to internet training or whatever, training's maybe the wrong word, advice and stuff like that, very US focused.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know what Canada, like what the system in Canada was so
Yeah. What
much.
we
And
had
it
to
was,
offer.
yeah, or even
Yeah.
or even how to how to start navigating it in any real way. Not to say that it's certainly not easier stateside, but at least it felt like there were people who would talk about it. There
Yeah.
were ways that you could learn about it.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of other little things where it was just like I wasn't able to kind of get on that first rung to, like, just working behind the scenes on a show or something like that.
Yeah.
And acting, of course, is like the most opposite thing you can do if you're like, oh, it's really hard to navigate show business. Why don't I try and,
Why don't I try the
like,
hardest?
why don't I try the hardest thing to
Yeah.
possibly do, which is
And were
to
you writing all the time though? Like, did you also have that muscle being exercised?
well, that's the other thing about it is that, as you well know, I am writing is not what I primarily do.
No,
So
but it's something you love, right?
something I think I realized at a certain point, though, that I'm not a very fast writer, and
Look, who
certainly I think
is?
that's
Who is Jennifer Podemsky? Maybe. Just
I know a
churning them out.
couple of I do know a couple of people who are pretty fast writers,
Yeah.
and that's
Jesse
always been
Gabe.
sure, sure.
Yeah, she's a fast writer. You're right. But it's hard. I find writing so, so difficult.
It's a very challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
I wrote a lot of short films at the time. I'd sort of, dipped my toe into TV specs and that kind of thing. Um but eventually what it was that happened was that I wrote a short film that I wanted to make, and it really was as straightforward as that in a way, because I did actually start volunteering on other people's short films.
Right.
Um uh you know um just helping out in any way that I could. I think I was officially considered like a production coordinator, or I think I was an AD once, but I don't think I even knew what that job entailed at the time.
Right.
It was just a
Yes.
title that they would give you because you were trying to be there to help.
Yeah.
And again, it was actually a really good environment to do that, because it's, there's small projects. There's not the intimidation of like working with 100 people at the same
Yeah.
time right off the bat, because I
Yeah.
didn't know what any of these jobs were yet. So I did, when I started acting, I ended up meeting a lot of actors, and again, it's Toronto. We're all kind of trying to do a little bit of everything. So
Yeah.
I would, I would help them on their things. All of the people who helped me on my early short films were like almost exclusively actors.
Yeah.
No
That's what
matter
you
what the
do
job
though.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much I did a short film called What You Eat, and the production designer was a fellow named Craig Snoyer, who people might know more as a stunt performer. He is not by trade a
No
production
kidding.
designer,
I love it.
but he was literally like, "Oh, I saw this couch on Craigslist. We really need it for the it's just
No
like
way.
he was great in that way. But
Yeah.
and same thing with my friend Jonathan Robbins, who ended up being my director of photography. I shouldn't call him my director of photography. I was a little weirded out when I say things like that. The director of photography on the
Sure.
first
Right, because it's a
couple of short films
collaboration.
that
You're
I did.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
And
it.
and it's those are the people that I knew and could, communicate with directly at the time.
Yeah.
I've definitely, I really appreciate everything that anyone who just, showed up to help me out, not knowing at all
I know.
what we were doing was really, I was just really grateful for that, for their help. And yeah, so those are the first couple of projects.
And did you direct and write that first that short film? Did you direct and write it?
Yeah, I all the short films I've done, I wrote myself. So the first one that I did was not What You Eat. What You Eat was the second short film
Right.
that I did. I did a film before that, which it's called Pride War. It's named after a song, so the title actually, um, I didn't necessarily think too much about the title, in terms of what it means for the the actual storyline
Yeah.
of the film quite as much. I feel like I liked the title for it, so that's I don't even remember the song, to be honest. I just remember really liking that name. But it was essentially about a woman who was obsessed with her brother, like in a almost line crossing way.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was very short. My friends Carrie Richards and Darren Adderley starred in it, and I was in it too, which is the mistake.
Okay. Okay.
Which is it. Honestly, if I wasn't in it, it might actually be a movie that I could still show to people. Or
No.
I will say the production value of it is we shot it for very, like, it really was, uh you know director of photography, um a lovely woman named Felicia Sims, who was essentially entirely the grip and electric department. So it was like seven
Yeah.
people total, I think, including myself and the actors. So it's not necessarily an achievement of production value, but I think it's a good character piece, and so I do think if I wasn't in it, I would probably show it to people more. But
I'd like to see it. I would love to see it.
I mean, you can see it.
Okay. I would
I
love
can
to.
send
I
it
would
to
totally
you.
would love to. But I also think like every project we do, we learn different things, right? And even as an actor, you learn something from being on that set. Like it just keeps like we're never going to be perfect. No project I'll ever do is going to be like, and I'm done. That's perfect. But I'm like, oh, I'm going to pick up that lesson. I'm going to pick up that lesson. So I would love to see it. I would love to see your vision of the cinematography.
I think the thing that I learned is that I am not like I mean, I think I've learned this lesson again and again working as a director, which is that when you have auditions for actors and you see all of their reads and stuff like that, you know, you really, if you've been an actor, you really understand
Yeah.
what you what it was that you were being what was being asked of you, but then also what it meant for your tape to show up on the other side, or your
Yeah.
audition to show up on the people who are sitting behind the table. And I to quote the great Jordan Peele, I am not my own favorite actor.
But you know what? It doesn't surprise me that you have acting in your past because when we were working together on Murdoch Mysteries, you had a language that is not typical of directors. Like you have an actor's language, which is really like I don't know. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke, but I found that so rewarding to work with you on that set.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to hear that. I really do think that, I don't regret my acting years or the years where I
Yeah,
was primarily focused on pursuing acting, even though I think by any stretch of the imagination it was quite a failure for that. But it was a very great thing to go through because I
yeah.
learned a lot about acting and what actors go through. I was basically in a class for, I want to say, close to 5 years or something regularly. And it was, and just to learn and understand and be in that skin of like, this is what
Yeah.
actors do. And the rare time that I got to be on a set was, again, very instructive and very interesting, because of that, because I was like, oh, okay, I am actually, because again, being in a class versus being on set, also
Totally
different
different. Yeah.
experiences.
But I think that's so healthy. Like, I think actors should direct something. Even if they're not going to become a director, they should write something, they should direct it because they should cast things. Like, I think we don't
Oh
understand each
gosh.
other's roles.
And I think directors should take, like, even directors who are not planning on being actors should absolutely take
100%.
take
I've
acting
seen that every
classes.
once in a
Yeah.
while in my acting classes, like a director will pop in, and I love that. I think that's so commendable. But like as a director, people don't know, like you have to also audition for like you have to pitch your vision of the show. I'd love to hear a little bit about the process of that because I don't actually think people know what goes into, when you've been directing on a show like Murdoch Mysteries or Hudson and Rex that has been running for a long time. You're coming in there with like, here's a vision that's in line, as opposed to something that's your own project. What was that like for you?
Well, I do think that, yeah, I do think that I am very stressed out about meetings and interviews and stuff in general. So it's certainly, I certainly feel a pressure, when I go into a room like that. I think t television's sort of interesting because, of course, you are sometimes going into an established space. And the director has it's a slightly different job in a way,
Hmm.
than it is on a film because you are there to work within and create an episode of a show or more than one episode of a show that fits into to what the show is
Right.
doing, and whatever that may be at the behest of the producers or the showrunner and the showrunner and everybody else who works on the show every single day.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
slightly different thing. I think really what it is being able to um being able to communicate uh something that hopefully will make them excited to have you on board,
Yeah.
even though they've hired 1,000 directors in the past, even though they've done however many episodes that there are. And if you can come in and show them a perspective or give them an idea or something,
Hmm.
that you personally like about the show, or you personally want to lean into more
Yeah.
about the show, that tends to be a big, point of conversation. Um, I'll be honest, I think kind of the main interviews I'm thinking of are ones where I was coming into a new show or trying to come into a new show,
Right.
because those are a little bit more of there's a discussion in that's a little bit different because the show doesn't quite know what it is yet. I mean,
Right.
even if they have some ideas. And so you're able to bring up anything that you think is right for them, and reference other material and reference other shows or movies or any thoughts that you might have that are kind of a little bit newer in that respect. I'll be honest, I did not interview to work on Murdoch, so I actually don't really know what I would have
Yeah.
necessarily said, because it's what I really like about working on Murdoch Mysteries is that they it's sort of it sounds slightly paradoxical, but they have such a defined show at this point.
Yeah.
It's, for the number of years it's been on. And it has changed a little bit over the years. If you go
Mhm.
back and look at some earlier episodes of the show from, like, let's say 10 years ago or something like that, which I've had to do at times just in order to, well, I'd seen the show now and then coming up, but also just like I would have to specifically reference like a character or a storyline, and I
Right.
would have to go back and look at it, and you're like, oh, it actually has shifted a little bit, and
Yeah. Yeah.
tonally, and like how they anyway, but of course it's a show that's been on and it's trusted, and they know it's going to keep its audience really ultimately.
Yeah.
And so working on it, actually there's a freeing quality to it because you can try things on that show. And there's certain things that I think if you're there inherently are if you understand those things about the show and you deliver it the way that, the way that uh, I'm literally just thinking about, like, you're not breaking anachronism, you're kind of making it work in the
Right.
period element of the show, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're not, quote unquote, breaking the characters at all. Like,
Right.
the characters live in the space that they're living in. I think they get a lot of freedom, honestly, to kind of try things
Yeah.
and do things. Maybe the most extreme example of that are episodes that I've not worked on, but they did a musical episode
Yes.
recently.
Right.
They did an episode that was sort of noirish, black and white kind of style for their, I think it was an anniversary. It was like their 200th or their 250th
Gosh.
or something like
Yes.
that. Things like that. Like, they have they've done a couple of the symphony episodes. Like, they have these like
Right.
bigger kind of ideas that they can have. But I even think on a day-to-day basis on that show, every episode has its own flavor, its own style, and
Yeah.
I do think we have a lot of leeway with that because I don't think there's necessarily someone who's constantly over their shoulder
Yeah. Yeah.
about
There's a
every
like
single episode,
Jennifer's got it. Like, we're gonna hire Jennifer to do Jennifer, and she's got it. She's not gonna introduce something that's like completely out of left field.
And I even think even when in the finished products, like they're fairly trusting in that way too, where I think again they work with they work with us some there's some consistency certainly in the people that they work with,
Yeah.
and but they also are a place that can bring on someone new or can introduce someone new into the system because it's, again, the sort of structure of the show and they have such a good understanding of how it works. I think, you don't feel like I mean, the main constriction, honestly, with any show, any television show really is time. I mean,
Yeah. I know. I always think about that though, because it's such, as you said, like a paradox of like the journey of artistic collaboration of the piece, the acting, the cinematography, and then this tick, 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 that's not artistic. Nobody's ever said that's an artistic quality of having good timing, but it's really important for
it's
a
a
director.
it's a big thing that you have to pay attention to, and honestly, it does sometimes, it is sometimes something that forces certain choices in how you're going
Yeah,
to
of
shoot
course.
something,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So that's, that more than anything is probably how, uh how certain choices get made that either in a day, because in a way the working day is as much of a thing as you're thinking about as the episode itself.
Hmm.
So a very specific day where you're like, I have this many scenes, strips on the call sheet, and I've been thinking about this schedule for, a couple weeks probably.
Yeah.
um and and I've internalized what I'm going to do on what day. And yeah, there's some days where you're just like, I understand that this is a day where we're being
Right.
demanded of to do a lot of pages. And so the way that I would shoot this is probably going to be more like this because we need to make sure that, that we get through everything, of
Right.
course,
Right.
and that maybe there are scenes that are that you're going to spend more time on. And then maybe there are scenes where you're like, you know what, if we design design a really fun oneer to get through this, then
Right.
that'll be what we do for the scene. Because, and again, it's not that it should be the main consideration or the first thing that you're thinking of when you're making decisions like that. But again, ironically, it bringing different energy to a show, it does sometimes mean, hey, we're making a decision on how we're going to shoot this. It's going to be the way it's
Yeah.
cut because there's no actually other way to cut it. So in a way, you are kind of forcing their hand a little bit, or forcing your own hand to be like, have to make a choice about what this is going to be. And, I'm not going to I'm not going to have the coverage or the timing I'm not going to have the coverage to protect me. So the timing has to work as well. This
Right.
has got to feel, but again, all those things are very, you know, for all, like if you're doing 60 scenes in a show, every scene's going to have its own set of considerations based on all of those factors about, what you want to say about it, how it's going to be. And then there's a lot of the practical considerations that
Yeah.
go into it as well.
Did you feel that you, like, when you said you had to, early on, you were talking about leaning into things to show like a different aspect of a show? When's the last time you interviewed for directing a show that you really had to, I don't know, like challenge the creative, challenge what they already had set up?
Um,
Like, I would love to hear a story because I think, like, as directors, as young directors and new directors, this is something that people could really do with advice on or support in, of like the interview, because we don't talk a lot about that.
that's true, actually. Yeah. I have interviewed some, like I've had some interviews, obviously in my day. I wish I interviewed more. That is one of those things that you discover is that, it's not quite like auditioning where, it's like, oh, you can go, well, and not that I even went it a lot as an actor, but obviously I know actors and probably yourself is the same thing. It's like you're going in enough that it's like it does sort of, you
The
sort of get a
muscle,
little stronger. It's a muscle. You kind
100%.
of get used to it.
Oh my gosh, they should have like a director's interview, like workout class. Like we go to studio
that,
to
I
do
mean,
acting training. Why not?
you're
Because it's
not
hard,
wrong. You're
right?
not wrong.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise you
And
go into these interviews and you're cold. You're like, I haven't done one of these for a long time. It's like pitching a show.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I found for a long time I would only ever get a meeting if it was like, if I was if and of course I can't say this for sure, but because of the scarcity and all that sort of stuff of the
Hmm.
interviews, I was like, I think they only bring me in if they're quite sure that I am
Right.
someone who they are interested in,
Yeah.
among the main people. So it doesn't
Yeah. Like
happen
you'd
that
have to
often.
really mess up that interview to not get, because they're already pretty sure they want you.
Or the way that actually, it's funny. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who has run a show, and they actually told me, there's an A list and there's a B list, and
Interesting.
and it's sort of that thing where it's like, if you're on the A list, then you'd be shocked how little not that it matters, not at all. You can definitely get knocked off of any of those lists.
Sure.
But the idea is that even if you're on the B list and you give a great interview, it's not necessarily going to push you onto the A list
Right.
unless, something kind of happens in that area. And similarly, you may think you did a little better than you thought you did, even if I'm
Hmm.
very hard on myself, and I also think I have done interviews quite badly, but it is surprising. You're like, oh, it's actually, there's still a conversation happening
Yeah. I think it's
outside of that.
also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's also like auditioning in the sense of like you can have like a great audition and it's just not right for that time, but they'll keep you in mind. So a B-list director might go, that was a great interview, but it's just not right for the timing, or we owe that person one. So let's keep Jennifer in mind for this part, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
they shelve you.
The other example I could give too, similar to an acting audition, is that if you have an audition and you're so right for the part, you flub some lines. Maybe you even, you know what I mean? There's something
Yeah.
that if you're right for the part, we're still going to be like, yeah, but they're great. Like
Hey,
they're great. They're right for it. They're great. Yeah,
We just had this big discussion about this.
nobody cares about you dropping lines or flubbing or whatever. Like truly, if
Yeah,
you're
I
right,
think that's so interesting.
very very early on, I interviewed for a kids show that that was going into, I think its second season, and it was one of those things where, or it was one of those interviews where they did kind of ask, what did you like about the show? What didn't you like about the show? What would you?
Right.
And
And you're
and
like, I loved everything about the show.
I very conveniently avoid the question of what did you not like about the show. But actually what I said to them, which I did think was a very, that's the thing. It's the thing that you can do is lean into the things that you really like about it.
Yeah.
And, so oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the specific thing about it, but I really, like I said, like, oh, this is what I really enjoy about the show, or these scenes are kind of my favorites of the show, or that kind of thing. And so I was like, so I literally said I would focus, I'm not going to necessarily focus on what it is that I didn't like about the show, but
of course,
I would like, I would really lean into these kinds of things because I think that's what really works about the show. And part of it too is that meeting was very instructive to me because it was essentially my first meeting or interview for a show, more or less. But it was, I really kind of felt like there were a couple points where I'm like, okay, at least I did speak my mind. I did speak up. I did say what I really felt. But then there were a couple times where I was a little hesitant because I was sort of like, sometimes you hedge your bets a little bit because you're like, I'm still trying to suss out what they want to hear,
Right.
And that's not really necessarily the way to do it,
And that's the same in auditioning too, right? Like, what are they looking for versus what can I bring? It's the same.
Yeah, because there were a couple of times where it's like, oh, I want to jump in and say that the show like looks like, like an an Instagram post or something, and I truly didn't do that. And then, the showrunner was like, we actually, when we gave our marching orders for the show, we wanted the frames to look like Instagram. And I was like, yeah, we're totally, but I didn't say my part of it. So it's not like they knew that I felt like we were pretty in sync on like what the show felt like. But that's sort of one of those things where, again, I had a meeting, or an interview not a few months ago, sadly did not come to pass, but essentially the whole thing about it was that it was a new show, so the idea of the ideas that were being bandied about by me were very much like, I am taking what I see on the page and I'm going to tell them how I would do this. And honestly, I did kind of come to the end of that feeling like, oh, because they started to talk about what what they had in mind and that sort of stuff. And I realized that I probably had made some assumptions that were not exactly what they had in mind.
Right.
Because it wasn't a show. It's a show that you could interpret, I think, a few different ways tonally, because it is quite an unusual show. So it's an interesting thing, because I felt like I was kind of both being like, well, I think they understand that as a director, I'm not just going to go off and do whatever it is that I'm not just going to be like, oh no, I'm just going to do it my way. Because they had an idea of what it was. But at the same time, I think sometimes it is nice, and it is, I think they are assured sometimes if you do end up like having the exact same reference as they do.
That's exciting.
The exact same thing.
Yeah.
So, but again, you can't, there's almost no way to guarantee that, I feel like, unless the show already exists and you're like, oh, this obviously I could talk about this stuff, because they shoot the show, or the way they do the show is kind of like this. So, but on a new show, it's harder to do that. But
it's finding like the collaboration things, though, don't you think? Like when you're speaking the language, like if you say like, oh, it's like news radio, I'm like, oh, I get you. I'm in that zone, right? As opposed to some show that maybe I'm not as connected to. And I mean, that's just, It's just speed dating. We're just speed dating all the time, right? We're just going to take a little break and talk to you about a fantastic sponsor we've got. And then I promise we're going to go right back to this conversation. Let me ask you a question. Do you like to laugh? And if you said no, I don't know who you are. Are you a robot? Are you a robot listening to this podcast? That's incredible. First of all, the robots are taking over the world. If you love to laugh, I've got a great new series called Got MILF. And just so you know, MILF stands for Millions of Individuals Laughing Forever. So put that in your back pocket. Got MILF is a series of 18 sketches created, written, and produced by comedian Susan Serrero. She's a scream. She's got all these different characters, and each sketch is entirely different and such smart points of view. It's a female-driven sketch comedy series that really shines a light on the deep, dark crevices of the female psyche. MILF is a sexualized term, obviously, for women in their 30s, 50s, and it's a limited description of a woman's worth, isn't it? It is. Through these sketches, Got MILF likes to mess with people's perceptions of what sexy is and showcase that women are complex and interesting humans by focusing on the humor in the everyday lives. And sometimes, I mean most of the times, ridiculous situations that we find ourselves in, because life is ridiculous, and somehow Susan Serrero captures it in this series. So Got MILF, it's currently available on YouTube at Got MILF Sketches and also Susan Serrero Sketch Series. You're going to want to go over there, especially if you like to laugh. And if you don't like to laugh, you're a robot. Turn yourself off. And now back to the show. So do you feel like, I mean, career-wise, your focus is now directing? Like, did you notice a time when you started going, no, like directing is what I want to do. I'm going to just start putting all my eggs in that basket? Because you were producing so much before, like with Sex After Kids, and like, is that still in your wheelhouse, or do you feel like you're pushing that aside?
I will say that I think I would probably try and focus on producing for myself.
Yes.
That is still something that I think is what I feel like out of necessity is probably
100%.
something I'd have to
100%.
do.
I never understand people who produce and then they're not involved with the production. Like a producer that doesn't direct or write or star in. I'm like, what are you producing for? It's so much work to produce and then not get the, I don't know, the carrot at the end of the stick of the actual creativity. Doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean, I will say there's aspects of producing, and again, it depends what kind of producer you are and what you're in charge of and all that sort of stuff. I do think there are aspects of it that do, like, I'm a very pragmatic person, so part of it is like what I like about directing is that it's kind of, it's all the creativity and it's all the pragmatism all put together. Like it's magic, but then it's like how do you what 7 things do you need to do to get the magic?
Yeah, right.
So there's, and not to say that producing isn't creative, because I certainly think it can be, but I think
it can be for sure. I don't think all producers look at it that way.
I think some producers really don't necessarily want to spend all their time on set. I think that's part of it, where it's sort of like it's maybe fun to come in for a while and then
they're like, it's so
step off
slow
when they need to, because that's the sort of there are different pressures. I think there are a lot of pressures on producers.
Agreed.
That are different, and I suppose it just depends on which ones you want.
Yeah, but then again, that's that collaboration thing, right? When you're talking to a producer and they are obviously speaking from a creative aspect, then you're like, oh, we're speaking the same language. Or if they were like, I only show up on Fridays for sushi day, then they're not going to be maybe on set as much as you think.
And there are also producers who are there all the time. They're living. I mean, when you work on a TV show, of course, it's usually a writer producer or a writer who's there with you all the time, and like, so it's not that they're not necessarily in the same space as you are even. But it's sort of a different kind of. Yeah, there's different concerns, different things that you're watching for, and yeah, some producers don't don't spend as much time on set. And again, sometimes it just depends, honestly, where maybe where the fires are, where
Yeah.
things are
Yeah.
happening, and there's so many different kinds. And so the title is, in a way, doesn't necessarily mean anything until you understand what it is
Yes.
that,
Totally.
what actual piece they have there. But I don't know. I feel like directing is certainly the main thing that I focus on. It is certainly my main thing. I do think that um, I feel like we all kind of have to be open, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I would like to write more. I don't write as much as I would like to be writing. And because there are things that I want to make, and there's also, the sort of realities of our industry,
Hmm.
is that it can be, I find it quite challenging, honestly, to um have to rely on other people for a lot of things. Not like shooting or production things, but more
Hmm.
like just trying to figure out how to navigate this career, um, is really, sometimes you are having to depend on people and on other people, and unfortunately sometimes, maybe often even, that doesn't necessarily work out. So I feel like there's that aspect to it too, where
Yeah.
I don't, it would be maybe a luxury to be somebody who could just take, oh, I have a meeting for 10 shows next week, and I'm, being offered a movie, and I'm, whatever, like anything like that, like people actually, seeking you out and things like that. For the kinds of, for the kind of work that you want to do. But the reality is, as we all know, is like that it's, we're all our own entrepreneurial
Yeah.
creatives. Like that's the reality of it, and we have to be flexible, and we have to, you know there's no world where we all just sit back on our sit back
Nope.
and let anything roll in. And so
Mm.
I'm currently in a period of time where I am trying to figure that out a little bit more, because
Hmm.
I do think I need to be, understanding where my energy is going in that respect. Um and yeah, I mean, I would, of course, if like, I would love to continue working as a director in television. I would love to, do more film. But there again, there's a lot of things that I love about what we do. So
Hmm.
I'm trying not to cut myself off from everything, even though right now I will say, I mean, I really haven't necessarily done much other than direct in the last few years.
Yeah,
So
but then there's also like I'm sure as a writer, like you said, you've loved sitcoms. So there's probably three or four sitcoms in your brain and your heart that you're like, I gotta work on these at some point. Like, and you said that, like, do you know what's stopping you? Can you see what's stopping you from doing that? Like, because sometimes I look to write, and sometimes either the material is so personal that I'm not ready to look at it, or I'm not ready to see the funny in it because I'm a comedian. But what do you think?
I think right now I feel maybe a little maybe just a little um pessimistic about how things are right now, I guess, is
Yeah,
maybe the word.
yeah.
Probably a harder word than that, but
Yeah. No, but it's true. Like if
but
you think
things
about all the
are
strikes that we've had in the last, even last 2 or 3 years, it's a lot. And
our, our
it's
our
hard to get
business
momentum.
our business has contracted in a very serious way, and that
Yeah.
started before the strikes. I felt like I did kind of feel a little bit of the writing on the wall there. It was sort of like first quarter 2022, I think it was, where um Netflix announced that they had lost a lot of money. I think they had managed to, I don't know, I used to work in accounting department, so I have some understanding of accounting, but
Right.
I feel like they'd managed to kind of report their losses in a certain way that was like okay for a long time, and then they had
Yeah.
to finally like bring down a report that was like quite poor.
I like to
So
stay happily ignorant about numbers and be like just blindly going towards the light.
The kind of fallout of that was that sort of a maybe more, I mean, we all understood that streamers were not making money, but I think it kind of came to a head at that
Right.
point where it was like every streamer had to acknowledge that they were not making money and could not spend money the way they used
Right.
to.
Right. Right.
They could not simply keep spending and hope that they would prevail and eventually start making money, which is a very tech mentality.
Yeah.
And so I think, I think that was sort of the time when things started to, there's been a lot of fallout, I would say,
Yeah.
from that time. And then, of course, the strikes ended up
But what do you
being
think the
another.
answer is to that streaming issues? Like, I feel like there's got to be way. I mean, of course there has to be ways because we need to create art. People will always watch television. They're always it might be delivered in different ways, but what do you think the answer is?
Um, well, it's funny because a lot of the streamers are now bundling together. So
Right.
essentially they're inventing cable again, but they have they have managed to cut out a lot of the financial incentives for creators in that respect. So that's sort of the hard part of it was that, the reason the strikes happened, or at least one of the big negotiating points was that it used to be and of course in Canada we have a slightly different system of the financials of all of it a little bit
Yeah.
different. But stateside, it used to be like, you had a TV show on the air when it was rerun, you would make a little, when it aired, you would make a little more
Americans
money.
don't know about that. Americans don't know that we don't live like that. When I told somebody, they're like, I said something about residuals, and they're like, but you get residuals. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Yeah,
It's
it's a different circus.
Yes, I do. I mean, I do. There is like we do like directors and I believe writers as well. I'm fairly certain they get their production fee, and I forget if they get an error fee. But like directors, we get the buyout for
Right.
the under DGC a buyout amount on top of, so that's sort of how they handle the airing part of it. But stateside, it was always like you, if it aired again, you would get
Right.
there would be additional money in it. And, I think the sort of, and yeah, so streaming, of course, is like an on demand. It's very specific to, like, that's the point of it, is that you can watch
Yeah.
anything anytime.
Yeah.
And of course, the sort of tricky part of it then is that they were not reporting any of their numbers. So if you had a super successful show, or if you didn't, that was information that you were not
Yeah.
given. And I actually am not certain about, because of course with residuals it was more like, okay, well your show will get renewed, and you know, there's there was something in a success. You know what? I have a better example for that. Producers who produced independent movies. The idea with being a producer of an independent movie is that if the film succeeds, that then you are essentially compensated well in success. And with movies all now being on streaming, there is no, hey, our movie is the biggest hit in the world and everybody on every continent is watching it. Does not translate to more money for
Right. Right.
a
Right.
producer. So it is hard. There's definitely people who I feel like maybe I'm starting to go down a part of the conversation where I'm maybe speaking out of turn and do not, but I do remember reading, I think I forget. I think it was an article by Chris Moore or something. There's a site called Dear Producer. I feel like if anybody goes on there, they can definitely find this article or this
All
piece.
that,
But
I mean, it's
it,
just changing, right? We're just in this
yeah, where
flux,
it's
as
just
you
like, but it's
said.
just like, what is the incentive for producers to take big
Right.
risks on things
Right.
if there's no promise of, hey, if this hits like the way I think it should hit, then we'll, like, the incentive, especially for an independent producer who is often essentially out of pocket at the start of a
Yeah.
project. I mean, I think a lot of the creators are at the start of a project of an independent thing that's not already financed by a studio or not set up at a studio. So it's
Yeah.
changed the landscape of like movies, and so
Yeah.
there's so many things that kind of fell out of like what streaming did or didn't do. And and I think it's funny because now, of course, especially, all of us creatives were lamenting a little bit of the lack of shows that have
I
long seasons
know.
and
I
long runs that
know.
have lots of jobs for people.
I
And
yeah.
then, I the trend now, I guess, is that a lot of my writer friends are telling me, yeah, they're all of the streamers now want what they call a procedural, which is effectively a procedural. Because
But
they
they,
realize that procedurals are actually really big hits.
right. I
And again,
know.
listen, I actually really, I always have conflicting feelings
Oh
about
no, I
all of
love
this
a good
because,
procedural. I love it. I love it. But
oh,
it
I
has
mean,
to be balanced. We got to see like
right.
the
That's the thing. I'm like, of course, I would love to see the return of many long-running, long season shows.
yeah,
Absolutely. But I also am like, you know what? Streaming did give us some, like, it really did help take TV out of like, TV can only be this or that.
yeah,
Like, it could be a comedy or it can be a drama. And like, I
yeah,
actually really love a lot of the TV that kind of came out of the streaming era, which was like, we don't have to be any one thing. We can be a lot of genres blended into
exactly.
one. We can take risks. I am certainly someone who benefited from there being a lot of, the fact is there were a lot of streaming shows out there. And so, there was maybe a little bit more
Hmm.
like, hey, those directors aren't available. Maybe there could be, so there's,
Yeah. I think
Dave
you're
in
right
there with a
too.
show or two.
When you're like doing a like when we have a lot of plates spinning, we have more capabilities as you're moving forward. But if somebody's like, I'm just doing this lane, I think it's more challenging to stay creatives, to stay active in our industry.
I think it was, I think it was nice to have a balance well, the reality is though, we also had like, there were also very, like, there were cable channels, and so
Yeah.
they did do programming that was a little more, I mean, experimental's maybe the wrong word, but they did kind of push a little bit outside the box a little bit more. There was definitely that environment there.
Hmm.
I think the realities of it now is like nobody, I think, really knows exactly how things are
No, but
necessarily
that's
going to
just also
land.
like it's exciting too, right? Because who knows where we're going towards. Maybe this is the time to really like take some big swings and see what else we can create.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree.
I have to wrap it up. I hate it, but this isn't a 10-part series. I'm going to wrap it up with some firecracker questions.
Oh,
But this
okay.
has been such a treat. I love talking with you because you're not just, as I said, you're not just a director, you're not just a writer, you're not just an actor, producer. You've got all now accountings in there too. Like it's such a great full discussion. So, all right, here are the questions. Fill in the blank. A firecracker is.
Oh God. Sorry.
It's okay. It can be your first instinct.
Sorry. I was thinking, do you know that Looney Tunes character? The big mustache and the cowboy
Oh
hat.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Sam.
literally just had a picture of Sam just holding on to the firecrackers.
I love it. It's perfect. What do you want to be best known for, Jen?
Um, I want to be best known for being a really good director.
I love that. I love that. What is, if this is a movie, like let's say your life was a movie, what has been a climactic turning point in your movie?
Oh my God. I think maybe the climactic turning point in my movie was actually directing a short film for the first time
Yeah,
and having the moment of the lightning bolt, as they say.
yeah. I love that. Yep. What is something that people don't know about you?
Oh God. Sorry. This is really throwing me. I'm just wondering if there's anything that I have that an unusual taste or something.
I think the acting thing is actually big. I don't think a lot of people knew you were started as an actor.
I love comics. Is that
Yes. What's your favorite?
Four Kids Walk Into a Bank is probably my favorite.
Fantastic.
And oh God, I just and anything that's about somebody's really sad real life that they've
Right.
drawn into a comic is
Right. Yes. Do you remember classic comics? My father used to always get me classic comics, like Joan of Arc, but in comic form.
Oh, I don't really know. I kind of grew up with like newspaper strips
Okay.
comics, so like Bloom County and that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
got it. What has been your favorite mistake that you've made?
That is a really big one. Um I don't love my mistakes. Maybe that's something I need to appreciate more.
Well,
I'll
I
be
think
honest. I
mistakes
just
also interesting because I never think of mistakes as being necessarily because you gain something from them, right? So,
Well, maybe honestly, maybe being an actor, maybe pursuing
yeah,
acting is my favorite mistake because it
great.
took me to, yeah, it taught me a lot. It makes me better at what I do now. And, I think that probably is it.
I love it. Who's a firecracker in your world? Somebody that you can shine a light on.
Oh my goodness. Who is, oh God, there really are genuinely
I know
so
there's so
many
many. I
people.
know. I'll never stop this podcast. There's so many people to talk to.
I am actually just going to mention a friend of mine, Sarah Goodman, who I just ran into the other day for the first time in a really long time. I always really admired her. We were in TIFF studio together. And she's been very open about this, so I think it's okay for me to say it. She had a concussion. She suffered a bike accident and had a concussion some time ago, and I know it was a hard recovery for her, and it was just so nice to see her out in the world
Hmm.
and just, she's such
Cool.
a talent, and I just I wish all good things for her. I was literally just thinking about her this morning because I got to actually reach out and actually catch up with her because we haven't in a long time. But yeah, she's just but I could name thousands. Like I
I know.
truly know thousands.
Great. It's great.
So let's do that another day.
Yeah, right. That's an hour, just name after name after name. What is something that you haven't done, but you know you have to do?
I have to learn how to figure out how to exercise and not hate it.
Yes.
That's still something I
Yes.
have not worked out at my age. So
I have the theory of like if you have a gym membership that costs you $10,000, but every time you go, you get $100 back. I'd go
all
all the
right.
time. I'd go all the time.
I mean that's a good deal.
What's been your favorite piece of advice or your worst advice that you've ever received?
Uh I don't I mean I don't again I don't know that I have like a worse piece of advice.
Hmm.
I do think um I do think there's a piece of advice that I was given, and I know it doesn't originate with this person, so I won't necessarily name them. I feel like it's one that gets passed around quite a bit. But it's a directing, and I don't even know if it's advice, but it's a directing kind of statement, which is they can love you now or they can love you later, and that's to do with the day, your work day.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
if you need to go over and you need to get that shot, then you know sometimes you have to do it. And the fact that they're happy that you ended on time is not necessarily going to help you when you're in the editing room and you don't have the thing that you exactly want. So,
Perfect.
that's
Perfect.
that's
My
the one.
final question to you is advice to a younger Jennifer.
Oh, maybe chill out a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, I'll take that advice now too. Thank you very much.
Well, I would say try not to take everything so personally, maybe. Or I don't know. Maybe that's part of what makes this all work. But I think that it's easy to take it's easy to take other people's input and feel intimidated, or it was always really easy for me to feel intimidated by what other people thought or felt or believed. And truth be told, I still have a lot of that. I'm definitely a people pleaser,
Oh yeah,
but I
me
do
too.
think you do have to trust yourself more in
Yeah.
general.
Agreed, agreed. If people want to find out what films you're working on, should they go to your Instagram?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I have a website. It's just jenniferliao.com, which has,
Perfect.
it's just a page, but if there's anything they want to learn, that's probably the
Perfect.
place to start as a starting point.
It's such a pleasure talking to you, and I really, really loved working with you too. It's really been a highlight for me in the last little while.
Oh, that means so much to me. It really, really
Yeah,
does. I had such a wonderful time working with you
yeah.
too. We were so, so happy to have
Well,
you
it
there.
wasn't, they
Yeah.
weren't like funny scenes, right? I usually go in and try to make things funnier. And so the direction that you gave me was really helpful and really, I felt very supported.
Well, I'm so glad you went with me on that journey. We definitely, I know I may have pushed you in different directions, but
Yeah,
I feel very happy with how that whole episode turned out. So I,
awesome.
I hope you feel the same.
Me too, me too. Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, till next time. I've really, really loved this time with you.
Oh, this is so lovely. Thanks, Naomi.
All right. See you soon.
All right.
Make sure you follow along on our socials at Firecracker DEPT to find out all about our events, our workshops, our projects coming up. And if you want to get involved, just reach out to us. There's always room at the Firecracker table for you. Our podcast is hosted and produced by me, Naomi Sneakus, and Pau Carranza. Our editing team are Jennifer Rowley and Jana O'Connor. Copywriting is done by Rebecca Gismondi. Video and graphics manager is Aislinn Paul. Jody Quine is our website designer. And Angela Murdoch is our socials manager. Big thanks to our actioneers, Veronica Martin and Pau Carranza.